less than a week before the election, it all went horribly wrong for Richard Nixon. Because less than a week before the election, it was 5 nights before Election Day, on Halloween night, 1968, the Democratic president, LBJ, went on TV in a surprise, nationally televised address. He made a surprise announcement that peace was at hand. The communist side, the North Vietnamese side, was going to make major concessions at peace talks. The U.S. anticipating that the other side, the South Vietnamese, were going to agree to a deal based on those concessions. Peace was at hand. The terms were all set. Peace was at hand. In recognition of the fact that peace was about to be declared, the United States would step back right away and stop all military operations in Vietnam. LBJ said that on a Thursday night. The election was going to be the following Tuesday. Turns out the Democrats do know how to end this war that the country hated. So this was bad news for Richard Nixon for that election, right? Bad news for Richard Nixon, but good news for the country who wanted the war to be over. Good news certainly for the people who were fighting the war. This was good news, right? Almost. Thursday night, LBJ made that announcement that peace was about to be agreed to by all sides in Vietnam. That was Thursday night. By Saturday morning, never mind. Deal was off. Peace was not at hand because the South Vietnamese side had decided actually it didn't want the deal. In fact, they didn't even want to talk about a deal. They pulled out of the peace talks. And so the war was back on. What happened? What happened between Thursday and Saturday? Now we know.
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. President.
How are you, my friend?
Good about it.
Well, I've got one this morning that's pretty rough for you. We have found that our friend, the Republican nominee, our California friend, has been playing on the outskirts with our enemies and our friends both. He's been doing it through rather subterranean sources here. And he has been saying to the Allies that you're going to get sold out. You better not give away your liberty just a few hours before I can preserve it for you. Mrs. Chenault is contacting their ambassador. Now, this is not guesswork. Mrs. Chenault, she's young and attractive. I mean, she's a pretty good-looking girl. And she's around town. And she is warning them to not get pulled in on this Johnson move.
President Lyndon B. Johnson, 1968, Saturday morning, November 1st, explaining to Senator Richard Russell what had gone wrong with this peace deal that everybody thought was going to end the war. I mean, LBJ had been so sure this was going to end the war that he went on TV Thursday night and told the country the war was going to end. Peace was at hand. The reason peace did not happen, is what he was explaining on the phone, is that the Republican nominee for president that year, Richard Nixon, had intervened in the peace talks to blow them up. He used an intermediary who was involved in the talks to approach the South Vietnamese side and tell them, don't do it. Approach them and tell them to pull out and not agree to a deal. He told them this deal being worked out by LBJ, this whole deal to end the war, these peace talks in Paris, is not going to be a good deal for them. They should not participate. They should just wait until after the election when he, Richard Nixon, would be president and he'd give them a much better deal. Johnson was going to sell them out. He, Richard Nixon, was the one who they should deal with. Nixon's intermediary was actually caught on tape telling the South Vietnamese ambassador, just hang on through the election. Hang on, don't end the war. We need the war to keep going through the election.
And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know. I think it would shock America if a principal candidate was playing with a source like this on a matter this important. Yeah.
Now, why didn't LBJ say anything publicly? I mean, this is right before the election. Can you imagine how the country would have reacted to that? This is a war the whole country was against. It was going to be over, except candidate Dick Nixon intervened to undo the peace deal and keep the war going. Can you imagine how angry the American public would have been? But LBJ did not say anything publicly at the time because he thought that he couldn't. And the reason he thought he couldn't is because of the way he found out what Nixon had done. The FBI illegally wiretapped the phones of the South Vietnamese ambassador. That's how we knew. We couldn't let anybody know that we were illegally listening into the ambassador's phone lines, and so they couldn't let anybody know what it was they heard illegally while they were illegally listening in on the ambassador's phone lines. And so Nixon got away with it. And the October surprise, the Halloween night surprise that the Democrats' war was ending right before the election, that October surprise ended up getting undone. The war did keep going, and anybody who was anti-war in the country really did have no reason at all to vote for a Democrat. The racist right-wing guy peeled off 13% of the Democratic vote on the other side of the Democratic coalition. And so, yes, the Republican, Richard Nixon, won. It worked. Richard Nixon got elected, barely. Squeaked by, but he won, in part on the basis of the idea that he was the guy who knew how to end the war, not those dumb Democrats. And of course, Nixon did not know how to end the war. He sure knew how to keep it going, but he didn't know how to end it. He didn't have a plan. And instead of the war ending on Halloween in 1968, the war went on for 5 more years while he was president, in which time more than 15,000 Americans were killed, as were untold numbers of Vietnamese.